Well, hello everyone. Here to show you right here of talking about to talk about your story about whenever it comes to oldest explains to the youngest right here, and they have right here talk about for pay grade also, and then also a little a letter right here and talking about jobs right here, and so it's like that. So let's just say if it is supposed to be like maybe like a Monday morning, and like the teacher's gonna maybe ask you to go ahead and write a letter about maybe something that you were able to achieve or something like that during the weekends or something like that. But I'll go and show everybody here that this right here is supposed to be an image right here. This image right here is supposed to be something like something I was working on whenever it comes to man and vice president right here. And so like talk about for girls, and talking about for the younger, the older and the younger sister right here. And so whenever I was working on this, I was just thinking too that really that you want to go ahead and talk about what sisters, what young ladies usually talk about whenever it comes to having the older or the younger sister type of conversation. And a lot of times it sure seems that way that that whenever we're going to be talking about the oldest to the youngest, though, in 102, that, whenever it does come around to talking to somebody about something, and a lot of times, and you want to know, too, that, the source of support that you're willing to give to somebody, and a lot of times it's like, that, whenever it comes to talk about English writing, and maybe whenever it comes to other subjects or other topics that you want to talk about. But it sure seems that way that, when we do speak about jobs, though, and you want to go and kind of tease about that to where the jobs for boys and the jobs for girls, right? And I want to know too that whenever it comes to pay grade right here, and so it's like that. So it sure seems that way that that whenever we do speak about jobs, though, and I want to know too that what exactly is it that we talk about whenever we talk about pay grade right here. And like I say, well, what does pay grade mean right here? That's another way of how you want to call us, as to where that, it's a responsibility that you really, and I know that a lot of times it's like people might say that, do you kind of get the pay grade mixed up with playground? Like, anybody that might even say too that, whenever you do mention pay grade, right here that somebody might even say that, oh, okay, I thought you said playground or something. But so it sure seems that way that that whenever we do get into that conversation about what you call is to where that during a Monday morning or something like that somebody's going to maybe ask you to write an essay just to talk about something that you were working on maybe over the weekend or something like that. But at the time, you want to know too that whenever you do write a letter or maybe a poem or any sort of essay, and let's just say that most of the time it's maybe going to be about 5 characters long, something like that. Five sentences, and it's like that 5 sentences long. So most of the time that that's going to include something like 5 sentences long. So how many characters would that be? About 175 characters right here. And so how many of us would maybe agree that maybe that's just a little bit too much right there? But let's just say that if we're going to be filling out an application a lot of times, and let's just say that 175 characters, and I want to know too that do you think that maybe that's just a little bit too much writing right there, just for like anybody else would say that that if you were to be talking about something that you were working on, and 102, that, well, really, that, why is it that you cannot explain the situation about what was going on during, any sorts of chats or, maybe any other sorts of conversation? Why is it that maybe that you just can't talk, over, audio, than compared to just writing a letter? And like everybody else might say that, well, really, whenever you do write a letter, a lot of times, that you want to know too that a lot of times, like everybody else might say that especially if there's going to be audio problems or something like that, and like everybody else might even say too that whenever you're having these meetings and these conversations with somebody, that most of the time it sure seems that way. That yeah, if you're having audio problems, that you're able to follow up and read about a little bit about what somebody has to talk about right here. And so, like, let's just say that yeah, if you're actually reading from a script or something like that, and like 102, the yeah for who's talking it is, and like say the yeah, it's if it's Katie or if it's or if it's Margaret or somebody like that, or if it's maybe if it's a Kim, if it's Kimberly, or if it's maybe yeah, Natasha or something like somebody like that, who's gonna be talking, and so you're likely 102 that whenever you do start a conversation a lot of times, but one thing that I did want to talk about right here, I talk about the youngest explains to the to the young. I'm like, yeah, the oldest explains to the youngest right here. So really, that it's like whenever you have these conversations, a lot of times, that it's like yeah, that you want to go ahead and start the conversation by saying like yeah, jobs for girls and compared to the jobs for boys is another way of showing is that anyone who refers somebody to be is capable of achieving those tasks and then the reasons why. So it's like yeah that so if you're going to be working on an application, right, and 102 that why is it that most of the time that if you're going to be answering a yes or no answer to an application and at 102 that yeah, please explain why, give a good reason why, to why that if you say yes or no on an application or something like that. So like anybody else would say that if you're going to be having a conversation, especially with an older brother or somebody like that, and 102 that yeah that how often are you really going to see maybe so it's like yeah, so if you could maybe answer maybe on an application, and it's like yeah, a lot of employers, by the way, may not even accept that, and if anything, they say that yeah, well, really that if they ask you a question a lot of times, this manager is going to maybe say that we cannot accept that for an answer. That you got to put yes or no right there. But still, that whenever it comes to a lot of times with most of these applications, though, and 102, that if you were to put on there maybe right there, or yeah, that or like yeah, something like on occasions or something like that. So yeah, if you were to say something like that, well, so yeah, so if you were to say something like that on an application, and that you're 102, that yeah, that the simple facts and everything. So it's like so every time you do speak about applications, and maybe whenever you think about writing a letter, that you're always thinking too is that toward yeah, who else that could be reading this, and 102 that yeah that at the beginning of this essay that you were told to go ahead. I'm like yeah, according to that application that you were told to explain yeah that so let's just say yeah, let's just say the question was as toward that you know you can you explain to the oldest about your work experience. So it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about siblings, though, and you'll want to know too that yeah, you have these conversations a lot of times, maybe with an older brother, or older sister, or somebody like that, and you say that yeah, that most of the time it's like yeah, you have these conversations, and you're always want to know too that yeah, this call could be monitored and recorded for quality training purposes or something like that. But how often are we going to maybe think as toward it? Yeah, well, really, I would be modifying this call, or maybe I would be recording this conversation, but I don't really know how to do that. So we're just going to go ahead and have a conversation, over, yeah, over Zoom call or something like that. But it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about that, and 102, that, yeah, oldest, the older brother or the older sister or something like that, or maybe a cousin, And a lot of times it sure seems that way. That when we do speak about poetry, or I'm like, yeah, with a lot of stuff right here that really has nothing to do with a lot the poetry and poems and all. But I'm just saying right here that if you're going to be talking about jobs though, and 102 is toward it, yeah, you want to go ahead and kind of tease about that, and 108 is toward it, yeah, jobs for girls compared to jobs for boys. And want to know that, yeah, that there are some jobs that a lot of girls that just don't know how to do them, or if anything, they don't want to do them, or for any reason at all, that they're saying that, okay, yeah, that, they're actually are waiting until that it's the right time, just to be able to work out the details, that sorts of stuff, whichever it is, but still, but really, how many of us would maybe feel more comfortable talking to an older brother or an older sister just because that somebody that you're close to, and maybe maybe if it is a good advice that you would maybe be able to give to, maybe to the younger sister or something like that. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, somebody that you're closer to, and somebody that you can talk to about any issues that you like to talk to a lot of times. So it sure seems that way you talk about stuff like that, but let's just say that if a lot of the situation was in writing, so like let's just say that if the teacher were to maybe ask you that can you explain what you've been working on over the weekend in letter form right here. So let's just say that in letter form, right, in 102 that in letter form right here that you include maybe a smiley face right there, and 102 that okay, yeah, well, you go ahead and write down on here that anything that you've been studying and all that. But it's like every time you do think about that, and at 102 that you go ahead and one part of the application is maybe going to ask you about that, to where that can you please explain, like right here. I'm like, oh yeah, that there's going to be space, two spaces, double space right here, double quotes and spaces or something like that. But it sure seems that way that when we do like if you were to maybe add any columns or anything like that in 102, that I would like to know that how many people are present in this conversation right here, and just 102 that the question above was about is toward that can you explain to the oldest about your work experience. And let's just say that you go and ask the question, but then maybe you put on here maybe a print quotations or something like that, that to explain very well with confidence. So really, what to explain very well with confidence, right? And so it's like so in a lot of ways it's like do you really want to put that at the beginning, or maybe towards the ending of a complete question right there, for a sentence right there, right? So it's like every time we do think about that, and at 102 that that right there is not really a complete question right there. That right there, like anybody say, is toward it, would you maybe want to go ahead and put that maybe after the question mark, or maybe before the question mark. But in a lot of ways, it's like when we do look at the word and complete sentences right here, and 102 that this right here, a lot of times it's like everybody else might say, is toward it there is a such thing as asking a question maybe before that a few facts about, okay, before you ask the question, okay, yeah, that anything that you have to talk about right here. And so it's like, yeah, so it's like, so a lot of times it seems like the topic right here is all about is toward that before you start asking, the questions right here, that do you maybe think is toward, okay, yeah, it's really the thoughts and anything, anything that comes to your mind whenever it comes to a conversation, right? So it's like So in a lot of ways, it's like, yeah, that talk about for jobs for girls right here. And so it's like, yeah, jobs for girls. Jobs for girls, and you want to know too that, yeah, well, the job for girls would maybe be a buzz is like, can you please write that in a complete sentence right there? Write this, in full sentence right here, full sentence paragraph right here. Full sentence paragraph right here, and full sentence paragraph to where that, try to include action verbs or maybe, maybe a noun or a verb or something like that, or like, yeah, call it, but still, so let's just say that if you were to start out the sentence by saying is to where that you go ahead and ask the question to where to explain to the oldest that this right here that this right here these are the skills I developed overnight, and maybe put an apostrophe or something. Yeah, overnight. So any teacher might even say that, okay, I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're talking about here. So it's like, yeah, so if you were to write a sentence like that in a 102, that, really, that, anybody who's going to be reading and listening to a lot of that in 102, that, these are the skills that I developed overnight right here. And so every time you do think about that in a 102, that, okay, yeah, that, is that what you're talking about? Jobs for girls and maybe about pay grade. And I know that everybody else might say, yeah, you know what a pay grade is. That whenever somebody says pay grade, right, that usually means is that a response. Yeah, it's a responsibility. Responsibility. It's a responsibility that that comes sooner or later. And I guess that's another way of how you want to look at it, sooner or later. So yeah, that it's a job that comes sooner or later. So even though that you may think about jobs that you've had in the past in 102 that yeah, it's been 2 years in 102 that you may think that you did all the work that you were supposed to do and all, but let's just say that everybody else might even say that yeah, that do you think that maybe that would be a nice conversation to be able to have with an older brother or an older sister, that or to where you have and maybe talk to the youngest one, or maybe talk to anybody else who's maybe around that age to where that they can really better understand about the situation. So it's like, yeah, that every time we do speak about jobs, though, and you're always 102, that, yeah, well, jobs that you're like, yeah, during the whole time, while you were taking that test, or maybe during the time that you were in that party room, or maybe while you were at the party, that there's been stuff going on there. I'm like, yeah, in the bedroom, or maybe in the office, or maybe classroom, whichever, that you were not aware of. And so it's like, yeah, so every time we do speak about conversations like that, so it's like every time you think about that, to where that, yeah, can you explain to the others about your work? And so it's like, yeah, that so it's like, whenever, if you were to write a complete sentence, and let's just say that if you were to maybe write a few things like, yeah, explain the oldest explains to the youngest right here is that, yeah, that once upon a time, yeah, that that it was yeah, I used to work there. I used to work there, by the way. Yeah, I used to work there, but then the work got to be got to be too complicated for me to handle. handle. But really, what you are trying to say is that you have learned a lot while you were working. While you were working, right? So it's like so whenever you do have these conversations with anybody, really, and at 102 that you go ahead and write in a few paragraphs about something, and 102 that you go ahead and start writing, and let's just say that this essay right here is going to maybe ask you to go ahead and include please include a special action verb, like a certain topics or something like that. But let's just say that that if they're going, maybe that like almost every application is going to ask you to please explain the reasons why, the details about the situation, right? So a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, really, that if you cannot have these conversations over the telephone, and for sure you're going to go ahead and have these conversations by the discussions right here in the 102 that really, that if somebody were to mention pay grade right here, that usually means is toward a task and responsibilities that come sooner or later. And the thinking is toward, yeah, well, you think that something is taken care of and find out later on it wasn't taken care of. And then you would maybe have to explain maybe on line 2 or 3 or something like that about further information about that. So it's like, so a lot of times it's like, when we do speak about jobs, though, in 102, that, that there are, do we maybe think is toward, okay, yeah, there are jobs for girls, and there are jobs for boys, and maybe if there's jobs for dogs and cats, whichever it is. But I just really think, too, that when we do speak about jobs, though, and you're always 102, that is toward that, have you had the job all that time, like all that time that you were hired to work for this company or something like that, or you were hired on like during that time that so like everybody else might even say that what do you call those jobs? Like the types of jobs to where a lot of, if somebody likes what they see based on about your work on your resume, for sure, but it sure seems that way, that every time we do speak about, talking about the oldest, though, and you're 102, that, to where, that whenever if you're going to have an older brother or an older sister, and 102, that you start talking about stuff, and you're always 102, that, a lot of things that maybe that this older sister and older brother is not really going to understand based on the experience about something. And a 102 that, well, really, if you're going to go and include maybe, a sentence right here, and let's just say that with the sentence right here, and 102 that, for maybe is toward it, that, that, for that, I saw of. So you're 102 that, is that really a complete sentence right there? That I saw of, or something like that. That I saw of, and you're 102 that, well, really, that's not really a complete sentence right there. Not everybody can really understand that. So that's why it sure seems that way, that it's like, whenever you first start writing and start saying a few texts, writing in a few texts and all that, and 102 that exactly, who else that could be reading this, and 102 that, hey, that, but still, that, but when we do speak about pay grade, though, it seems like that in case of anybody, like anybody might even say too, that, what does that usually mean whenever somebody asks the questions, and for sure, whenever somebody asks the questions for sure, that's the same thing as saying is toward 5 sentences and 175 characters right here. So that's usually whenever it comes to, I'm like, explain, but still, that, But whenever it comes to, yeah, when somebody, anyone is going to ask the question. So yeah, that they're going to go ahead and ask the questions, but a lot of times it's like, yeah, if we're talking about maybe 3 questions and maybe 4 questions at a time, and let's just say that maybe within 5 minutes or so, within 5 minutes, that you might get about maybe, yeah, within 5 minutes that you're going to maybe get about maybe 10 questions per minute or something like that. And you're always want to know too that, do you think that maybe that's just a little bit, like everybody else might say that, during the interview, most of the time with most questions though, that it seems like that the one question per interview that maybe if it does maybe take about up to 5 and maybe 175 characters just to be able to answer one question though, but still, like how many of us have experienced that to where that whenever you if you're going to be having an interview with an older brother or an older sister and a 102 that I still don't understand what exactly is it, what was that reason, or I'm still trying to understand the situation here. And so it's like, yeah, so it's like really, do you think that that's really your job to explain very clearly about what the situation is about? And so at the time you want to know too that, yeah, when we do speak about jobs, by the way, and it's like, you're always want to know too that, it seems like it first starts out with saying is toward it, yeah, that it starts out with a letter explaining about what all that you come up with and anything that you want to share and talk about, and a lot of times, but it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about having these conversations a lot of times, and that you're always want to know too that whenever you do have these conversations with somebody a lot of times, and want to know too that whenever it comes to trying to do the work, trying to do your work on, trying to continue, working on your work, and maybe if you're trying to write a book or something like that, and want to know too that somebody's going to be asking you question after question after question. But it's like a lot of times it's like you're always want to know too that is toward it if one question, I'm like, yeah, like it's like it all started by just if anything, just it's all just one. It was all just a one piece of paper right here with just maybe just a first 2 questions right here. And like everybody else might even say is toward how much do you think knows too much, right? But still, but at the same time, it's like whenever it comes to understanding about having these conversations with an older brother and older sister, though, and want to know too, really, what is so special about that? But still, it's like knowing that whenever it comes to understanding about is toward it, whenever it comes to trying to explain to somebody about remembering something, and that's another thing that I want to mention here is about something to remember for sure. And for sure that whenever you're going to be working on anything, for sure, whenever you're going to be working on anything, that what exactly is it that that you think that somebody is thinking about whenever they're looking at what you're doing. And I want to know too that something to remember. and I kind of like and I'll even tell everybody here that something to remember me. And yeah. So it's like every time you think about that, and want to know too that something to remember me, and something to remember me, and I do you want to put or if anything, maybe put a comma right there or something like that. Something to remember me, or if anything, a period or something. I'm like, yeah, but Oh, I'll tell you one thing, everybody. That if you're going to be printing labels for any gift exchange or something like that, for sure, they'll probably want to know too that you would need to use these marks right here, the plus sign and symbols and all that, especially if you're doing a gift exchange or something like that, especially during the holidays. But it's like, yeah, every time you do speak about that in 102, that, something to remember, so something to remember me. And so you're 102 that, really, that you want to go ahead and, if that's really a complete sentence right there, whichever, but still, but I know that whenever it comes to understanding about whenever a teacher's going to ask you to go ahead and write at least 2 or 3 sentences about something that you want to talk about, something that you want to share, and you're always 102 that whenever it comes to girls and whenever it comes to boys, right? But it sure seems that way. That how many times are we going to get that question toward it that these are the skills that I developed overnight? What exactly does that mean? Well, that means is toward it something that you were working on over the weekend, right? And you could probably put that right. You could probably put that too, right? And say that yeah, it was over the weekend. During the weekend. So it's like yeah. How many students are going to say that during the weekend? This is what I've been working on during the weekend. But it's like that. So it's like whenever you do first start out with the sentence, that maybe not everybody's really going to know what all this means right here. Whenever it comes to, I used to work there, and by the way, but whenever I was working there, and a lot of the complications about working there for that company and all that. So yeah, it's like so every time we do speak about text writing and everything, and you're always thinking too that you know that yeah, what a lot of this. Text messaging and everything, writing down notes and everything, and you're thinking is toward it yeah, whenever you first start writing and talking about something, for sure that you're 102 that yeah, especially if it's supposed to be a journal or something like that, before somebody is able to read that you're going to go ahead and just write on. I'm like yeah. So it's like every time you do think about that in 102 that you may feel like saying is toward it. Yeah, in a journal, you feel comfortable writing privately about something, but then, possibly who else that you think that could be reading this in 102 to anything else that you were going to say. But it's like, yeah, but still. But anything that I'm going to be working on for sure, I would probably say that, yeah, well, really, that every time, and I can be honest with everybody here too, that while I'm working on something, it sure seems that way, that maybe you don't use everything that you were working with just because of that reason. It's because yeah, somebody's going to recognize you just because of that skill, just because you are good. At certain time, is to where if you develop a good skill in for journalism or maybe for English writing or something like that. And 102 that really that whenever you do apply for a job though, and your 102 is toward it, yeah, something to remember, something to remember me by or something like this. So yeah, so it's like so every time you do think about that, and you're always 102 is toward that whenever it comes to something to remember, and so every time you do. Every time you do think about that, and the work that you're doing, and 102 that yeah that whenever you're going to be working on something, you try to impress everybody about what you've been able to come up with, right? And so you're like you're thinking as to where okay, yeah, that if you're trying to impress somebody with something that you're working with, and 102 that yeah that you go ahead and include a picture painting right there, and maybe a few memos or something like that. But still, it's like every time you do think about that in 102 that you didn't use all of the work. Yeah, well, yeah, that work that you were doing from earlier. Yeah, you didn't share it, or you did not include that on the email or something like that. So it's like So every time I do think about that, and like everybody else might say that according to that letter that you wrote, to somebody, and want to know too that yeah, well, you didn't send it. We'll want to know too that yeah, well, how come you didn't include that? I'm like, well, really, that are you really a little bit too shy and maybe a little bit too embarrassed, really, to say about what you were trying to say? And so it's like every time we do speak about jobs though, and you're 102 that yeah, well, the reason why that I didn't send the application right away was because that I was afraid that you were going to deny my application, or you weren't going to look at my application right away or something like that. So it's like so for any reason at all, but still that when we're talking about having our conversations with the older brother or the older sister though, and at 102 is toward it, yeah, that you're always 102 that don't you think that maybe that some of that conversation would also be about the parents, about go ahead and talk to mommy or talk to daddy about that. But it sure seems that way, that every time we do speak about writing something into complete sentences, and this is something I want to talk about right here. I talk about for pay grade right here. So what is a good example of about a pay grade right here? Do you think that pretty much means is to where that work that you were in charge? I'm like, yeah, work from a long time ago that still needs your attention, right? So a lot of times it's like, yeah, that your pay grade. And so I know a lot of times that like a lot of parents would probably say too that ways of how to explain about pay grade right here. And 102 is that work once upon a time, once upon a time, a time, once upon a time, there was a there was a task that required someone like me to read documents, to read a letter, to the king. And I guess that's if you want to look at it that way too, but still but it's like read a letter to the king or the captain or to the manager, whichever. But still so every time we do speak about that, and one knows toward it, like every time, almost every time you do speak about pay grade though, it's like, oh, you know what that means about pay grade though, is that you look at your mistakes. And a lot of times it seems like that's usually what it is that every time you do speak about pay grade though, it's like it seems like almost all the time you look at your mistakes. Yeah, so a lot of times it's like so every time you're looking at your mistakes a lot of times, and it seems like to me that that's exactly what it means right there. It's just that whenever you talk about your pay grade, it's basically like, in case that there's any problems that come up sooner or later, that you're kind of like having to pay the consequences about the situation. Like 102, that even though that during that time that it was your job at one time, just to be able to take care of that, but then now it was assigned to somebody else or something like that. So it's like, so it's like your 102 is toward it whenever it comes to pay grade though, do you think that maybe for any reason at all that you can maybe explain to somebody about a lot of things that's been going on, but still but a lot of times it's like that every time you do every time you try to explain to somebody about stuff like that, and it's like, they might not even understand what all that you were talking about from before. So it's like every time you do mention about, whenever it comes to understanding about whenever it comes to understanding, can you explain to the oldest about your work and then experience right here? So it's like every time you do try to explain about something like that, and at 102 that it's you may not be able to give a simple answer most of, but still, I want to talk about it there. Talk about for jobs for girls and jobs for boys. So it seems like almost every time you're thinking about that in 102s toward it, that I didn't think that was for girls, or I didn't think that was for boys. But it's like, whenever we do talk about jobs for girls and jobs for boys, I could be honest with everybody. I was actually talking about the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, because you know how that is that whenever you do speak about the Girl Scouts and 102, that you're divided into groups a lot of times, and I don't really think like everybody else might say this to where whenever you do speak about jobs though. That you don't really need to look at that as to where that that everybody divided in two groups, into groups or teams. I guess a lot of times it's like in teams. So really that so like everybody else might even say that that whenever you do talk about for divided though, the division and all, but still, it's like so every time you do speak about that right there in 102, that whenever it comes to jobs for girls and jobs for boys, and in 102 that well really that most for the most part though that you may got that idea, especially if it was from summer camp or something like that. If it was camp or maybe boys and girls club or something like that. But still, but every time you do think about that and 102, that on that application though that they're gonna ask you about the gender and all, but still that but really though that in case of anybody that may 102 that whenever you're going to be filling out any source of application, really, is to where that you want to know too that how often is that really going to be asked on an application about, are you the oldest of the family, or are you the middle child, or so like everybody else might say is to where that are you the oldest, or are you the youngest? So it's like that so how often are we gonna maybe think is to where if that's but to see are you the oldest? And I say that no. Like okay. So a lot of times it's like while you're talking, while you're having a conversation with somebody, by the way, and it seems like that you're going to reply like that right there. I'm like, you start talking about something, and it's like, you get a response right away and be like, are you the oldest? No. Why? Like, oh, well, I'm just wondering. No, why? So it's like, so and I know like everybody else might even say that whenever you do begin a conversation like that, and you're 102 that you go ahead and like everybody else, especially if you got a lot on your mind or whichever, that you're gonna go ahead and ask the questions, even though that you were not finished with what you were trying to talk about, and so it's like somebody's going to ask the questions. You're going to ask the questions for sure, but I tell you one thing, everybody, that even though if those questions may not have anything to do with what the topic is, what the subject is and all, but still, if you're going to be in an interview of some sort, and like everybody else would say is toward, somebody's going to be talking to you and somebody's going to be asking you questions to the point where, you drive me crazy, to where they start driving you crazy. They start driving the person crazy with all the questions. Crazy. So it's like every time you think about that in 102 that, a comma, put a comma right there. I'm like, yeah, parentheses or something like that. So every time you do speak about that, and 102 is toward it, that yeah, that whenever you do start a conversation with somebody, a lot of times it's like, no, why? Well, why do you ask? It's like, so yeah, how often are we going to maybe are going to realize that a lot of times? Yeah, whenever you do start a conversation with somebody, a lot of times, it's like, yeah, they ask you a question and you hear immediate, no, why? No, 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 why? Well, listen. So it's like, yeah, so it's like, so a lot of times it's like every time you do start a conversation with somebody, it seems like that's exactly what they're saying is to where, no, why? Just listen. Listen to me. And so it's like, yeah, so it's like almost every time whenever you're going to be having a conversation with somebody, especially, and it's like, yeah, well, it's not your turn to talk yet. It's my turn. Let me speak. And so yeah, so it's like yeah, we all know what that is. I'm like, yeah, especially if you're gonna be on group chat or something like that, even on Messenger call or maybe on Zoom. And 102 is toward the yeah, you go ahead and start a conversation, and a 102 that yeah, you're gonna go ahead and ask the question, and that question may not have anything to do with what the conversation's about, but still. But at the same time, no, it's like whenever it comes to interviews, so job interviews, that you go ahead and start a conversation with somebody, and at 102, that yeah, can you explain to the oldest about your work and your experience, and but still that it's like you're always 102 that whenever we do speak about an older brother or an older sister, and it's like yeah, how that is that if you grew up with maybe five brothers and maybe two sisters or something like that, family size like that, and 102 is toward it. You would maybe think that the oldest one is usually in charge of the babysitting and maybe taking care of things around the house, while mommy and daddy's away or something like that. But it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about conversations, though, and 102 that whenever it comes to having these conversations, and 102 talk about for responsibilities, right? And but still, it's like your 102 is toward it. You go ahead and ask the questions, right? But still, but talk about for jobs for girls and jobs for boys, and at the time your 102 is toward it. Yeah, that when we do speak about jobs, though, you may think that yeah, girls are usually in the kitchen, but then the boys are usually outside. Yeah, working on their bike and maybe maybe washing a car. But still, the girls are usually inside or working in the flower garden or something like that. But still, doing the dishes. But still, that when we do speak about the girls, jobs for girls and jobs for boys, though, and U102 is toward it, how many of us will maybe say is toward that the job to write a letter and maybe to look over the paperwork, that can really be that could be for both, right? Like yeah, jobs for girls and jobs for boys. But when we do speak about writing, though, and 102 is that speak about writing, it's like 102 that yeah, well whenever you do look at a complete sentence a lot of times, and you're always 102 that yeah, that you go ahead and read a letter right here, and 102 that yeah, well that still doesn't explain the question that what I had from earlier. Okay, yeah, well it'll make a little bit more sense. Maybe I'm like yeah. So it's like so almost all the time that whenever you're having these conversations with somebody, and at 102 that maybe it would make a lot more sense. Maybe if yeah, toward it everybody else might say is toward it yeah, somebody's able to see just a little bit about what you're talking about. I say yeah, well show me what you're talking about. But still, the skills that I developed overnight would be is toward it yeah, But still, but on the other hand, it's like, if you were to talk about that, especially in response to a question, and 102 is toward, yeah, what job have you done overnight, especially? And they'll likely 102 that, yeah, well, for sure, it's easier to say than done, right? It's easier to say than done. So, for sure, you want to go ahead and put on here as to where to listen, as to where it, for talk about for action verbs, as to where you write down at least one task that you want you to accomplish, and let's just say if it is something that you can do overnight, and let's just say that that that's something that you're thinking about doing, over the weekend, though, and let's just say that for like putting labels, and let's just say that labeling, labeling, labeling the no labeling the titles to the folders or something like that. So a lot of times it's like, think of one task that maybe that you can get done maybe within 5 hours, and like everybody else might say is toward that if you're able to work on that, like say the. So a lot of times it's like, every time you do think about that in 102 that really that and I can be honest with everybody here that if you want to try and if you wanted to try to surprise somebody, especially if you wanted to try to surprises for someone, if you want to try to impress somebody one morning, go ahead and say just to be able to impress somebody. One morning you want to go ahead and try to impress somebody that overnight you working on something, and you working all night so that way you can get it done, so that way you can impress them. So usually, usually between like everybody else might say, if you want to pick a time in general between from 2 a.m. From 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. or something like that that you were working on this, and 102 that so it's like, if somebody, another thing that I want to talk about is for being desperate about something. What does that usually mean whenever you're desperate about something? And whenever you're desperate, whenever you're desperate about something, that you're anxious to know what happens next. What happens next? What happens next, or like everybody else might say, that no, it actually means, what happens next, but it actually means that that you that something that that you are really you are wanting it. You are wanting it done so badly. You are wanting it done so badly, and I can put on my head. So I don't even know if that's even a complete sentence right there, but you say you are wanting something done so badly to the point to where that like that you have you experience more issues, more complications and issues, more complications that you do not realize. So a lot of times it's like, so it's like, we all work hard for what we do, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way that, that yeah, yeah, you talk about your choice is yours, right? But still, but every time we do speak about this right here, and you're always 102, is that really about what is so smart and what's so, but still, it's like so every time we do, every time we do try to have a conversation about something like this right here, and you're always 102 is toward it. Whenever it comes to understanding about responsibilities, right? And you're always one toward a lot of things that you worked hard for, and 102 that is toward if you are really are that desperate for something, then maybe that you would do it yourself. And a lot of times it's like that's usually like I'll do this myself. But it's like I'll do this myself, but still that but nowadays it's like maybe that's another reason why that a lot of places would ask to have a witness with you. Like have a witness and somebody somebody there to witness something, and a lot of times that's usually the case, right? And just for just for proof. I'm like so so it's like so if you're trying to take care of something important, and maybe if you're trying to talk about something and try to do something, and it's like a lot of times you're always 102 is that really, that having a good reference and a good witness with you really would help out a lot, just because of the fact that that's another way of how do you want to show proof of what was said, and for how it was worked and how it was done and all that. So that's why it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about these conversations with our with a older brother, older sister, is just know as to where if you're that desperate for something and you 102 that more likely you would do it yourself, right? You would not learn your consequences, and 102 is toward that you need to have discipline too. You do something, right? And so that's why it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about understanding about whenever it comes to understanding about the jobs though, and they're like can you explain to the oldest, but still, so it's like so every time we do have that conversation, a lot of times, and everybody else might even say that but it's like you know uh, every time you do try to have a conversation and about something about somebody, and it's like you talk for an hour and you're not able to take care of everything, but it's like I guess the factor of matter is just is toward it. What all have you learned based on your experience, right? But like everybody else might say, is toward it really that what all have I really learned about it is just is toward it. There's a lot more detail than of course what I realized, but anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.